From the moment Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights was announced, there was controversy all around it, from the first set photos to honestly everything, and it hasn't stopped now that the film's been released. But as a filmmaker, actress, screenwriter, sometimes producer, I have been very interested in the fact that all of these conversations have talked solely about Emerald Fennell, as if she, like Bronte, is a singular author of this film, despite the fact that films are by nature a collaborative art form. A director cannot go in and manually, correct the muscles on an actor's face. They still need costumers and all these people to bring their best to a project. So I want to take kind of a more expanded look at this film and the people making it, most specifically the film's main production company and partner, which is Lucky Chap. Lucky Chap is a production company that has a reputation of being Margot Robbie's production company, as she is one of the founders of the company. Lucky Chap, like all production companies, has its own flavor, its own goals, its own missions, and some people have consistently argued its own downfall. Despite being a company that makes some truly incredible films and oftentimes fan favorite films that are very, very focused in the female gaze and supporting up-and-coming female filmmakers or stories that show a more complex side of femininity, I honestly adore many of their films. There's one very consistent thread of criticism that Lucky Chap have received, mostly again within the entertainment industry by people who really have the ability to recognize what a production company does, because producing is always a more complicated, fluid aspect of the job the second that you get into the creative collaboration and outside of the money goals of producing. But the main criticism has always been thrown specifically at Margot Robbie herself and her contributions as a producer. And that main argument has always been lack of accuracy in adaptations, which makes it obviously a wonderful company for Emerald Fennell to have gone out to and teamed up with for a completely revisioned look at Wuthering Heights. This criticism goes back to the production company's first film, or at least their first flagship film, I, Tonya. There are a lot of scenes in the I, Tonya film that are, quite frankly, false. The scene where she begs at the very end of the film, small spoiler, to be allowed to continue skating never happened. Actually, the entire situation around that was very, very different and perhaps didn't show Tonya Harding in a very likable or passionate light, and the filmmakers ultimately decided to change that ending. There's always been a lot of argument that the reason they changed the ending was to give Margot Robbie a really big actor moment and to really show her chops by allowing her to beg passionately for ice skating the way that a filmmaker would envision or be enticed to beg about their project. And again, a lot of people have always argued that that's not fair. It's not right to change the conclusion of someone's journey just to allow the actor a better shining moment. Another film that was not produced by Lucky Chap but was starring Margot Robbie that also came heavily under this criticism was the film that she made about Queen Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots, also starring Saoirse Ronan. There's a big scene in that movie where the two queens meet, and that never happened in real life, and historians really, really begrudged that, along with other changes made, because they felt like it really tainted what was actually happening and the power dynamics, along with just creating a false version of history that people are now carrying. And so the interesting thing, again, with Lucky Chaps is normally this criticism about inauthentic adaptations and artistry has always fallen very heavily in the industry upon Robbie's shoulders. And now we're finally seeing an expansion of that where everyone's looking very hard at Emerald Fennell. But no one's actually asking, why did this film get made? Who agreed to make it? Why were people enticed to make it? Especially after a lot of the controversy with Saltburn, which was also a film produced by Lucky Chap. There's just a lot more, I think, to unpack to this. And I personally think the most interesting part of all of this and all of these controversies, specifically with Lucky Chap, is the fact that Lucky Chap seems to have a very unique stance as a production company on what their goals are and what they envision the importance and purpose of storytelling and filmmaking to be. And right now it seems that, at least with audiences with Wuthering Heights, that sits in a very different place, whereas audiences and fans of I, Tonya really didn't care about accuracy as long as they enjoyed the film. So I think for me, the purpose of making this video is not in criticism of Lucky Chap. I'm not so much stating my personal opinion on any of these things as I am actively expressing conversations around it, because I think a big expansion on the Wuthering Heights conversation is for us as audience members or as filmmakers to really find our integrity line and define that really clearly. Not to prevent filmmakers from making films or people from telling stories, but for us to have a really clear-cut conversation and be able to grow together with our morality and integrity and seeing where that sits in films. I don't know, I just think it's an interesting conversation as people and what our goals are and how we want to educate ourselves and expand our brains. The goal of this video is not to state my own personal opinion, because honestly I think that's irrelevant right now. There's so much noise going on around all of this, and more to have people who are any level of creatives or people who are active like film buffs to define for themselves what do they think the responsibility is for a filmmaker, and not just a filmmaker but the entire team, to accurate adaptations. Is there a difference between a material that is fictional and beloved, or is there a difference to an item that is following a real life event that is a biopic? Why do you feel like audiences are more upset over a fictional adaptation than they are an adaptation of someone's life? And as you go through the world consuming media, where do you sit? What do you think there's a line? Do you think it's a line of morality, integrity, or a line of preference? So anyway, I hope that this has been a more expansive conversation. I don't think this is a conversation, especially when it comes to Lucky Chap, that's going to be going away anytime soon. They have a very large production slate of a lot of upcoming projects, including adaptations, that I will show you. Especially because, as you see, there's a lot of films coming up on their slate, and a good amount of them are adaptations. There have been a lot of book rights purchased by Lucky Chap. So I'm very curious to see what the collaboration will look like, and also what authors are going to desire their unique spin and their take on scripts versus other production companies that offer perhaps less of this really heightened kind of energetic, wild feminine energy, but will offer the authors much more faithful takes on the material.